This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Tim, you are an interesting character. Why don't you tell the audience some of the things about you?
Yeah, well, let me start with why we're doing this podcast. So, I have been a patent attorney for 32 years. For the last 10 years, I have had two full-time jobs. One is CEO of Athalonz, and the other is managing my own law firm. And I've learned a lot over the 32 years of being a patent attorney from a legal standpoint, technology standpoint, and over the last 10 years of running Athalonz, I've learned a lot on the business side of what it's like to be an entrepreneur, trying to manage a startup, balancing life between work and family and all those things. So the For the Governed podcast is just my sharing my experiences through blogs that we'll release weekly, and then you and I will talk about them as a podcast.
So I'm curious, one, you're not just a patent attorney. You're one of the world's leading patent attorneys. I know you're kind of shy when it comes to stuff like that, but I want to be fair. Given your background, what is it that you think makes you look at these things so differently?
So as an engineer, so I have an electrical engineering degree, and I worked as an electrical engineer before going to law school. So as an electrical engineer, we're trained to look at problems in a certain way. So we work with the scientific laws and facts regarding electricity and how that works. So, and then we learn early on studying systems. So if you make one change in a system, that affects the whole system. So you really have to have this holistic view of circuit design and how those things work. So it's a very analytical approach to doing that. And then the law is almost the complete opposite. There are no absolute facts. There are no absolute this or absolute that. Everything is subjective to interpretation. So it creates a unique perspective that, all patent attorneys have, and I've worked more than most, between the analytical science, the physical science part, and then the logical analysis part that the law provides. So I look at things, I think, somewhat uniquely than most people because of those two perspectives.
Well, even though I'm a marketing guy, by schooling, I'm an exercise scientist. And I have to admit, you have taught me a lot. And there's been a whole different train of thought than I ever learned in school about when it comes to approach to performance in athletics. Give us an idea of how some of that plays.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I've really looked at since doing Athalonz, where we are into athletic equipment, in particular athletic shoe wear, is the difference between the study of athletic movement and the physical sciences. And it really was throwing me off. And I thought about this for years and years. And now I'm just kind of really understanding the issues and why there's such a disconnect. But the physical sciences are, physics, chemistry, electrical engineering, things like that, where we can observe particular behaviors and mathematically model them with pretty much 100% certainty. So we can get scientific laws and scientific facts on the physical side of things. Now, the human body and athletic movement, well, that's studied from a life science standpoint. And there are very, very few scientific facts when it comes to the life sciences. We live, we need water, we need to breathe, and eventually we die. Those are about the only absolute facts when it comes to human beings. So, and then the other thing I've learned is that, the life scientists, they're not trained when it comes to physical sciences. Their curriculum and what they learn and what they practice is dealing with life sciences. So since human beings or athletes are human beings, they're living things, they're studied by life scientists. So they look at the body in motion in a kinematic standpoint, which is the study of a body in motion without regard to how it was put in motion. As an engineer, I look at it as a physical science problem. So what's the physics of it? And the physics says that an athletic movement starts with the body pushing on the ground pushing back. The ground pushing back is called ground reaction force. So there's that disconnect between life sciences and physical sciences when it comes to the study of athletic movement. So we're bringing the physical science part into the study of athletic movement, and through our shoes, we're manipulating the forces to the advantage of the athlete.
I've noticed that when it comes to a lot of athletic equipment, particularly performance shoes, there really hasn't been anything new in forever. Why do you think these two sciences or these two fields of study haven't meshed more and overlapped more?
My take on that is really, from my experience in the engineering community, is that when a person is trained in a particular discipline, it's very difficult to look outside of that discipline to study things and to come up with different solutions. Almost all of the really unique inventions that I've seen over the last 30 years have come from somebody outside of a discipline applying a different discipline into another discipline.
Well, that's interesting because that's exactly what you've done with the Athalonz technology, with the Envy technology that's in the shoe.
Yeah, so we're bringing the physical science, the physics of the shoe and how it works and how it affects athletic performance into play, which from everything that we've seen over the last 10 years is unique, and we're the only ones that are currently doing that. So I think that's where, there's a disconnect. I like to call it silo thinking. We're trained in this particular discipline, and if the problem's outside of that silo or encompasses more than just that silo, it's very, very difficult to see the problem and figure out how to solve it.
Where does the phrase "for the governed" come from, and why is that important to you?
So that comes from a Supreme Court case back in 1970 or 1971. It actually is in the movie The Post. But Richard Nixon, when he was president, sued the newspapers to stop them from publishing papers regarding a study of the Vietnam War. And in the Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court ruled that the papers could publish those documents. And in part of the reasoning of why they said that is they said the purpose of the press is to serve the governed, not the governors. So I like that thought process that what I'm trying to do is for the little person, not for the big corporations, not for the governments, but for the individuals, the small businesses. And in our law practice, we're pretty much that way too. So I like for the governed. So it's for the little guy.
That sounds great. I know in our next podcast episode, we're going to be talking about the origins of Athalonz and how a lot of this translated into a product.
Yep. Okay.
So that brings us to the end of this session. Always interesting and intriguing. Join us for the next one. You won't want to miss it.